this video, I'm going to show you how I made this little window into this charming little pantry. Like many of my other projects, this one was born out of my refusal to throw away a good box. I've had this little box in my stash for years at this point. I think it held some cosmetics at some point, but it's really sturdy and well constructed, and I always felt like I could make something out of it one day. It was coated in this slippery plasticky material, so I gave it a vigorous sanding just to give paint a chance to stick. Acrylic paint would just slide right off plasticky surfaces. I ended up giving everything a good base coat of a dark brown acrylic paint inside and out, just so that I can start out with a more workable surface. As I knew I wanted to transform this into a little pantry, I wanted to add some really old looking wallpaper to the background. And for this, I just used some pattern paper that had kind of a vintagey vibe, and I chose blue as my primary color for this piece. So I cut out some strips, and I'm really distressing the edges of those strips with a sharp blade, just scraping. And I'm also curling some of the corners and ripping off some pieces, as I really want this to look very weathered and old. I'm sure most of us have seen old forgotten wallpaper in a grandmother's back room or pantry before. With the dark brown background that I painted, now if anything peeks through, there's just gonna be that nice brown instead of the white of the original cardboard. And I'm just gluing in the pieces, reconstructing the pattern on the paper, just kind of making it a continuous design. There's a gap missing there, but don't worry, I have a plan for that. For the bottom shelf, I found this strip of very textured paper that I wanted to use as sort of like a cloth covering. And I'm also emphasizing that texture even more by running some ink over it. And of course, I added a piece for the ceiling as well. I always knew I wanted like a brick portion on the back wall, like it's a section of a chimney. So to do that, I'm using a piece of foam in which I'm scribing in a brick design. And I'm just using my ruler and a pokey tool to carve in the illusion of bricks, as the foam is pretty soft. Besides that, I also want to add some shelves, and I'm just using some 1mm wood pieces that I also paint dark brown to use as shelves. And I'm also base coating the little brick section that I just made. But of course, I want it to look beautiful, and I'm going to use 3 different colors to paint the bricks. Reddish orange, a yellowish orange, and a nice brown. And I'm alternating painting the bricks in all the 3 colors, trying to recreate that randomness you get sometimes with brick built things. Maybe it's not random, maybe it's always intentional, but I think it looks really nice. Because this is foam, there's a chance that the acrylic paint would scrape off, so I need to seal it in. And I'm going to use some yellow shellac ink that I mixed a little bit of brown paint in. And it works as a varnish, but it also works as a wash to weather those bricks a little bit. And I'm just attaching it to that back wall section on the left, covering the piece that was missing the wallpaper. Next, turning my attention to those shelves, I'm just going to weather them as well with a little bit of light brown acrylic paint. I just didn't want them to look too pristine. I wanted them to look worn and maybe even a little bit dusty. In the end, I decided to only add the 2 long shelves, and they fit perfectly as I measured the foam brick thingy to be the exact width I needed. Now I wanted to fill my little pantry with all kinds of tiny cute things, and the first object I knew for sure had to be in this one was a braid of garlic. This is made out of polymer clay on a little bit of string. And I also wanted to have lots of different kinds of drying herbs. Another thing that I thought would be super cute would be to have these handwritten notes pinned to the wall, maybe recipes or shopping lists. So I just made these tiny pieces of paper, weathered the edges with ink again, and just made teeny tiny scribbles that look like handwritten lists. And here's a close-up. Once I've decided the best location for them, I'm just gluing them on with a bit of glue. And I'm going to attach my garlic and my herbs as well by dipping them into glue and carefully attaching them all with tweezers. They won't have any movement, but I think they look absolutely adorable as drying hanging little herbs. Next, into my pantry, I want to add this little bottle that's wrapped in dark paper. And let's say it contains pine syrup that we want to keep away from the sunlight. Next, I really wanted to add this cute pumpkin to my pantry, but it's obviously just way too big. So I'm just going to squeeze it until it's small enough to fit. If you'd like to see how I made the large pumpkin that I magically shrank, I have a video about the process and I will link it in the description. But now let's add our tiny pumpkin to the pantry. Next, I'm going to add this little stone bowl. It looks like it could be the mortar part of a mortar and pestle. And next, these little fruits. At first I thought they were tomatoes, but now I'm not sure. Maybe they're some kind of exotic fruit from a fantasy land. Display them nicely, I'm going to use this tiny plastic tray that I painted and weathered a little bit, and a little bit of miniature grass just to make the tray look a little bit fuller and more interesting. Next thing I'm going to add is this rectangular basket that has this really nice flow-on pattern, and I just wanted to stand out a little bit more and to look a little bit more realistic. So I'm just using the shellac ink wash from before, and I really think it did the trick to bring out that detail. I'm going to fill it with these rather realistic looking parsnips on one side. They are also made out of polymer clay, and I'm attaching them with PVA glue again, just making an aesthetic little cluster. In my imagination, there's whole sacks of grains and crates of potatoes under the table where we can't see from the window. Next, I'm going to use this miniature bottle and I'm going to glue some herbs into it. Maybe it's thyme. I like to think that it's filled with herb infused olive oil. And to complete the table level, I'm just going to add a nice little jam jar. This is a miniature glass jar filled with red colored resin. The next ingredient jar actually has some crushed black pepper from my own kitchen. For a pop of color, I'm going to add these teeny tiny yellow flowers in a little handmade vase made out of a thumbtack and a bead, followed by a little pickle jar. Once again, it's a glass jar filled with clay miniatures and a paper top. A nice ceramic jar to follow next to it. This next one, I must admit, is my favorite element. It's a miniature jar filled to brim with preserved lemons, and it's just so beautiful. We would store our cherry brandy in the pantry as well, in a beautiful glass bottle. On the top shelf, the first thing we're going to add is another jar of preserves, followed by a lovely miniature of banana jam. And of course, that's where we would store our honey. The next element also requires some assembly. It's this really cute round container with tripod legs, and I'm also going to fill it with some greenery. As we all know, keeping our greens fresh is best by keeping them in water. For the next miniature, I raided the spice cabinet again, and they are mustard seeds in a little jar. And to finish off the top shelf, I'm adding a little bottle of cooking wine. I also found this adorable miniature spoon in my stash, so I'm going to add it to the blank space on the table portion. Now, with the interior filled in, it's time to address the outside of the box. I'm obviously not going to leave it just plain brown. In fact, I want to add a wood texture to it. And to do that, I'm going to be making a paste with tile grout, PVA glue, some brown acrylic paint, and a little bit of water. I want this paste to be quite thick so that it holds its shape when sculpted. I'm just smearing on a generous amount of this paste with my spatula and then scraping off the excess, also cleaning with a baby wipe as I go. And to actually make the texture be like wood grain, I'm going to use a hog hair brush to basically carve in a wood grain texture. And I'm going to do that for the entire exterior of the little box, just making sure that I don't put any beyond the lines that I marked where the box needs to close. I let this texture paste dry overnight. Some of it was quite bumpy and there were like sticky outy bits, so I just took a rough sandpaper to it and gently sanded off all the rough bits, but not too hard, still preserving that lovely wood grain texture. After that, I went in with a lighter brown to catch all the raised edges of the wood grain texture. And I make sure to cover any bits that the paint may have chipped off or come off with the sanding. But of course, I had to seal this as well, and I'm doing the same trick of adding brown paint to my shellac ink. Again, this works wonderfully as a varnish and also as a wash. It flows into the recesses and it really makes the wood grain come to life. Almost like when lacquering and polishing real wood. I just really enjoy this step. It's so satisfying. And that's completely dry. I'm really happy with it as it preserved the highlights and the shadows as well. To finish off my little window, my idea was to add some flowering vines to the window frame. And to do that, I'm going to use this beautiful leaf ribbon. Sometimes simple solutions are okay. I don't have to make absolutely everything from scratch. So I just cut some lengths of the ribbon that I feel will look really nice, and I'm just gluing them on with more PVA glue, carefully arranging them in clusters that are pleasing to me, and adding some extra leaves here and there from the cut-offs, not really wasting any part of the ribbon. As I said, I wanted flowering vines, so I'm going to my little box full of teeny tiny things, and I'm going to add on these absolutely tiny flowers, just sticking them on by dipping them in glue and working with tweezers, because even my fingers are just a little bit too big to properly handle something so small. These are just simple plastic flatback flowers. When the glue has properly dried on those, I'm going to take a little bit of blue acrylic paint and I'm going to carefully paint all the little flowers, as my accent color for this whole piece has always been blue, and I wanted that reflected on the outside as well. And with that, my little window frame is finished, and the two pieces can be reunited, and the box can be opened and closed. That is not glued down, so one can take off the lid and have a better look inside of my teeny tiny pantry. I really enjoy making and using miniatures, and I've made lots of bookshelves and libraries in the past, but I always wanted to make kitchens and pantries. I think I'll make some more in the future. Who knows, maybe if you subscribe to my channel, you will catch those future videos. Please do let me know what you think about this project in the comments below. I would love to hear your thoughts. Enjoy the glamour shots, and I hope you have a nice day. Bye!